Hi Janites, welcome back to the What the Austen podcast. Another exciting episode lined up today. I am going to be joined by Sarah Quintrell, who is a BAFTA-nominated writer, producer and actress. She's best known for her works on His Dark Materials and also The Power. But probably what you're all most aware of at the moment is the BBC's new adaptation of The Other Bennet Sister, which is an adaptation of Janice Hadlow's book of the same name. And Sarah Quintrell is actually the screenwriter for that show. So I'm very excited to speak to Sarah. I have both read the book, which I absolutely loved, and really highly recommend everybody reading it. And I also finished the show. I absolutely binged watched the whole thing in 2 segments because it came out kind of 6 episodes on iPlayer, then the rest, I think another 5 maybe came out or something like that. And anyway, I watched them all and thoroughly enjoyed them. It's such a cozy comfort watch. You know me, I always love a BBC adaptation anyway. 2009 Emma remains my firm favourite, and the 1995 Pride and Prejudice will always have a very special place in my heart. So it was really lovely to see how they took this and also a lot of the Easter eggs that they decided to include within it. So I'm really excited to speak to Sarah and talk about the process, how they decided to make the adds and cuts that they did, amongst other things. There's so many great themes in this book that I'm really excited to discuss. So if you haven't read it, I really recommend picking it up. I think it's maybe even my favourite read of this year, and probably one of my favourite Pride and Prejudice spin-offs that I've read. So that is high praise indeed. But before we get into the episode today, I also just want to mention the mug that I am using. So this is from Jane Austen's house, and it is part of their Rainbow Quote collection. So I have 2 other of these. There is one that I've used in countless episodes. You've probably seen it. It's green, and the quote on it is, "It's a truth universally acknowledged." This one is "Obstinate Headstrong Girl," which I love, and I'm just channeling that today when I'm recording a podcast episode. But yeah, this is such a great collection. And Jane Austen's house, although I always recommend people going in person and experiencing the house for yourself, they also have an online gift shop where you can order to your home. It's sent directly from Chawton, and any purchases that you make at the gift shop goes towards supporting the house. And I just think it's so important that we do what we can to make sure places like Jane Austen's house stay open, because it's just a wonderful place to remember Austen and just kind of see where she did a lot of her writing and creative process, especially the little table and everything. So yes, if you would like one, go ahead and have a look on the gift shop. I love them. It adds a bit of Austen magic to my morning brew. And talking of my morning brew, what is inside the mug? Inside the mug, I have London Nootropics adaptogenic coffee. So London Nootropics create adaptogenic coffees, including mushrooms. So mushrooms have so many benefits. You guys know I'm a big mushroom lover. I love to forage for mushrooms. I love to talk about mushrooms. I'm big on the mushrooms, okay? And different mushrooms have different qualities, and they have different health benefits that a lot of people don't actually realise, but they're just incredible. And so London Nootropics, they use these mushrooms to create different blends, which help you with different moods and also different moments in your life, you know, where you need different things. So my usual blends tend to be Zen, Mojo and Flow because they come in my subscription box. But London Nootropics kindly sent me another variant to try than my usual stuff. And this time it is Mush Love or Fantastic Fungi. So this has a combination of lion's mane, cordyceps and also chaga. So it helps with all things like well-being. Lion's mane is great for brain activity and focus. And then cordyceps are really good for energy and increasing stamina. So loads of benefits. I'm really enjoying this one. Out of all of them, I feel like this one has the most chocolatey taste, because I feel like people often say, you know, what does it taste like? And they all have a very earthy taste that is, I really enjoy. But this one has got the most smooth, chocolatey kind of taste to it. So I really enjoy this one. And that is what I've got in my coffee cup today. So hopefully my brain's going to be firing well. And if you would like to try it yourself, London Nootropics are kindly offering my listeners 20% off if you use the code IzzyMeakin at checkout. So that's London Nootropics. And if you use my code IzzyMeakin, you will get 20% off. So yes, thank you so much to London Nootropics for supporting the podcast. And thank you to everyone listening and anyone who wants to buy anything through them. You know, you're also supporting the podcast and keeping me doing this for as long as possible, which I very much appreciate because I love doing this. But yeah, that is everything from me. Let's get into today's episode. So hi, Sarah. It's so wonderful to have you on the podcast today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so the first question that I ask all of my guests is, what got you into Jane Austen originally?
So when I was at school, and I loved reading, but I found school quite uninspiring. And about 14, I think I came across, I don't know, Margaret Atwood's work, and then I read all of Maya Angelou's. I started reading and reading and hoovering up reading. And I had this uncle who was like much older than my dad. He was like my granddad, an amazing man. And he used to buy us books, like 20 books for our birthday and 20 books for Christmas. And he'd curate them, and he'd go to secondhand bookshops and he'd put them all together. And then he'd hide a £5 check in one of them. So it was years before I worked out you could just flip them and see which one had the check in, because he'd know if you cashed it or not. So it did really kind of foster this love of reading in me. And it meant I had access to all of these books. And so I think I was in my late teens, maybe doing A-levels and finding it all quite dull. And I was reading my way through the classics. And I really put off Austen. I had this little collection of many Austen books. And I thought, honestly, I'm a South London girl. I just thought she might be a bit posh and she might be a bit jolly. And in the end, I thought, you've got to do this. And I picked up Emma, and I just couldn't believe how funny she was, and that this flawed woman was at the centre of this book, this flawed young woman who was manipulative and a bit selfish and meddled, and I completely recognised her and who she was. Like, I felt like I knew her, and I knew, I probably went to school with her. And it all just felt so truthful and so familiar. And I think that she, the sort of the way that she writes, and that sort of in the point of view, you're kind of drawn into these characters. And I ended up reading all of them and loving them all.
Oh, I love that. I feel like there's a message there, when parents are asking, how do I get my children into reading? I feel like buy them 20 books and hide a check inside, or a £5 note inside.
Yeah, it was a good, and it did really like foster this love of reading in me, and yeah, he knew the way to my heart.
I love that. That's so funny. And yeah, I feel like sometimes people are reluctant to pick up certain classics because they think they're going to be quite dull and feel like they don't relate to like our world now. Yeah. But the beauty of Austen is like she is timeless for a reason, because you can still recognize characters in your life now as well.
And nobody writes yearning and longing better than Austen. And I feel like as a teenage girl, that was the most longing and yearning I ever did, actually. Do you know, because when you're older, you can actually like go on a date. But when you're a teen, you can't act on any of it. So that I feel like, I with my kids, when they get to the age, I'm going to be like, this is your guide. This is your guide to life. Sit down with this lot.
Yeah, read Austen. You'll be grand. Yeah. Like, I agree with that. Like, it's done me well. So I think that's the recipe for everybody. And then also, I'd love to know maybe a little bit about how you got into screenwriting, but then also when this project landed on your desk.
Yeah, sure. So I was an actor originally. I always say it's sort of, it's the job that you see people do. I didn't know anyone in this world, and I decided really young, about 6. My dad had a childcare issue, and he had to take me to a Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was like, if that's a job, I'm doing that. And I never really wavered from it. And also just developed a real love of theatre, and I think with my love of reading and everything. And was lucky enough to go to drama school. I worked for a bit before to pay for it and everything. But I went to drama school and graduated. And just, at drama school, you work on the best texts. It's Shakespeare and even your contemporary texts. Like, I love Simon Stevens and Patrick Marber. They write brilliant women. And then I graduated, and those parts sort of disappear a bit. And I got into the industry, and I was a bit like, oh, we're not doing that stuff anymore. No one's looking for roles for you, and the roles that are there for you are less interesting. And I think it was actually, I didn't have the confidence to write. I don't know about you, but at school, there was no creative writing. I barely did any. I don't know how anyone finds out if they're good at it or not. But I wrote from a point of frustration, really. I wrote a film for me and Ray Winston to be, and I didn't know what to do with it. I thought, would you I didn't want to give it to someone I knew in the industry who might be sort of kind and be like, oh, Sarah, well done, and pat me on the head. I thought, it's really hard work. I want to know, is this good or not? So I stuck a Post-it note on the front and sort of said, if this is rubbish, I'll stick it on a bonfire and never bother you again. And I sent it to the actor, David Threlfall. And I did that because I'd read an interview with Paul Abbott about Shameless, and he said that writing for David was the most terrifying thing because he's just got, he's worked a lot with the Royal Shakespeare Company, so he's just got such an extraordinary understanding of structure and form and characterization. And I thought, great, this is the man who'll tell me. So I sent it to him, and then about a week later, a few days later, I had a voicemail from David Threlfall. I mean, Frank Gallagher on my voicemail, like, "You're right, Sarah." I was like, "What?" And he was like, "I want to direct your film." And we didn't get the financing, but I got an agent through that, and that started my writing career. And as soon as I started writing, I was like, I loved it. I was like, this is what I was supposed to do.
Oh, I love that. It's amazing. And also as well, like sometimes it just takes that one advocate that then pushes you forward, right? It's someone saying like, this is great. Because it's all well and good being confident in your own right and just being like, oh, I'm really proud of this piece of work. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to get traction and you're actually going to get jobs from it. So it's just someone else being like, I believe in you. This is great.
Yeah, you don't want to be that deluded person. And also I feel like I couldn't afford to be deluded. I've always had to earn a proper living. And I have a family now, I'm the breadwinner, and I needed to know, is this good? Can I do this? And he gave it to Paul Abbott, actually, and Paul Abbott mentored me. And I think Paul Abbott's saying to me, this is good, you can write, was probably the thing that made me go, I'm going to do this, and made me kind of push through the real difficulty of, the early career bits. Yeah.
Yeah. And then with this piece then, with the Other Bennet Sister, how did this come about?
So I was doing his Dark Materials. It was a co-write with Jack Thorne on the second series. 3 of us came on. It was a really good experience. And Jane Tranter and I were talking about kind of female characters in literature and how they're adapted for screen. And we were talking about kind of making sure they feel fully rounded and all this. And it was a really interesting conversation. And about a week later, she called me in and she said, "Do you know what? I've got this novel I think you'll like." And she knew Janice. So when Jane was in charge of BBC One, Janice was in charge of BBC Two and Four and so on. So they knew each other well and had huge respect for each other. And Janice had given this novel to Jane. She said, "Just have a look. I don't know what you think, about it being adapted." And Jane loved it. And she said to me, "It's Mary Bennet from Pride and Prejudice." And I was like, "Oh, yes." But also I was like, "But what else?" And she was like, it's about being the outsider. And I felt like, oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. I feel like I took it away. They brought the book in, this huge book in, and I thought, okay, what have I agreed to read here? And I couldn't stop reading it. Janice has written the most beautiful book, and there are changes we had to make for screen, obviously, but all changes were made with love. And my desire all the way through, my anchor for every decision I made was, how can I make the audience feel like Janice made me feel when I wrote this? I felt such a connection to this woman, who, the kind of character who never sits at the heart of our stories. This kid who just feels like she's on the outside of the world, and she's trying really hard to fit in, and the harder she tries, the worse it gets. And I suppose I started writing it from my own experience when I was translating it, and from the experience of, my generation, and feeling like we really needed this story. And as that happened, my friends' kids and my gorgeous nieces and nephews were growing up, and I felt like they need this story so much too. So it's really been the privilege of honestly, the privilege of my life to be able to adapt this.
I love that. And so how long has this process been then? So when did that happen? When did you originally read the book?
I was about 12. No, it was 29. It was 2019. And it's sort of been 7 years-ish on and off. Obviously we got hit by the pandemic, and then I was doing the power. So there are other things, and they're off doing things. So, it's been in my life for 7 years. There came a point 2 years ago where it became my everyday life, was Mary and her story.
Yeah. I love that as well, what you were saying about reading Janice's book, because I felt the exact same way. So I actually was recommended to read this back in uni. And I was saying to some of my followers, I have this like pesky condition where it's like, if someone recommends me something, I almost just can't read it until like the exact right moment in my life. It's terrible.
Yeah, no, I feel you, yeah.
But yeah, I picked it up because I knew that the BBC adaptation was coming out, and I was like, I want to read the book first before I watch it. And honestly, I loved it. It's definitely my favourite read so far of this year, and it might even be, I think, my favourite Pride and Prejudice spin-off that I've read, because it really does take you through all the feels. And it's so funny because reading Pride and Prejudice, I never resonated, nor did I ever think too much about Mary Bennet. And now I think about it now, I think that was very much by Austen's design, because you're not meant to focus on Mary. Like, she is one of these women who is kind of cast aside and forgotten, which is relevant to the Regency period anyway. So it's not like, I don't think Austen does anything by accident. I think there's reason for Mary to be there. But yeah, I was like, wow, I really fell into Austen's trap, and I have neglected Mary. And then reading this book, I was like, my goodness, I never realised that I'd have so much in common with Mary Bennet. And then I was also like, universally, right? Like you were saying, this is such an important story because there's so many messages within there about what it feels like to be compared to, like, in terms of beauty, or feeling like you've not met like-minded people and feeling isolated and alone. And then people who've had like trouble feeling like they were a burden on their parents, or not, their parents didn't like appreciate what they wanted to do in life and their own story and things. So yeah, I agree. I think this is such an amazing story. I'm so glad you guys picked it up.
Yeah, I think there's so much in there, isn't there, about beauty and the values placed on a young woman's life, and the standards that she's supposed to live up to, and how you feel when you're not reaching those standards, not just from your parents, but from society as a whole, that women are supposed to behave in a certain way, they're supposed to carry themselves in a certain way. You know, I feel like we don't really offer a great deal of respect to young women, even now, to teenage girls. They're a maligned group. You know, anything they like is culturally rubbished. If they like music, we're sniffy about it. And women, you know, because we're a patriarchal society, women do it to other women as well. Yeah. But I do think there's something really interesting about taking a kid like Mary and putting her at the centre of this story, and showing her some respect. And I think, you know, like you say, Austen doesn't do anything by accident, and Mary's a funny character. I mean, in my head, I had Lucy Briars when I was writing. Sometimes it helps to cast. And I started with Lucy Briars' Mary, and then I took Lucy Briars' Mary into our Mary kind of thing while I was writing. And because she's brilliantly funny, but it was really interesting to think about the journey that she has in the 1995 P&P, which we adore, and the journey that she has with us. And it, you know, Janice's book stands up to interrogation. When you're adapting a novel, you often find the kind of holes in it, or the bits that beautiful writing has covered or whatever. Janice's novel, I've been back into it and played with it and pulled it apart again and again and again. And it stands up every time, and it offers me more every time. And I honestly think it's the more time I've spent with it and the more I've interrogated it, the more extraordinary it is. I really recommend it to Austen fans, because I think there's so much to be discovered in there. And I don't know if you've ever spoken to Janice, but you should. Honestly, she's fascinating on the subject of Austen. She talked a lot about how we all like to think we're Lizzy, and most of us are Mary. And I think that's something she really hit upon, and I think is very true. She talks about Mary as a kind of dark mirror to Lizzy, that Lizzy gets what she wants, that everything that happens for Lizzy relatively easily. Mary just can't get there. She can't get what she wants. Everything feels like a battle and a struggle. So I think that quality really, really spoke to me. And I think that's why, you know, people are relating to the series as well.
Yeah, I think so. Also, something I spoke about in the podcast in the past is Lizzy has really great self-concept. It's almost you can't even dismantle it in some ways, because it is that strong. Whereas Mary starts off on the back foot anyway, because she's already got all this kind of negative comments. I mean, some of the quotes in the book made me so sad. Like this one, it says, month after month, she waited anxiously, anticipating the moment when Mrs Bennet would find something about her to praise. I mean, that's just heartbreaking. That's so sad, right? And I was just like, gosh, if you start your life that way, it's no wonder that the whole process of the book, and obviously in the TV show as well, she's got this whole journey of like dismantling all these thoughts she had about herself and actually realizing that she is enough and she is worthy. And yeah, I just think it's quite sad. And then when you look at Pride and Prejudice, you think Lizzy never had to do any of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, I know our Mrs Bennet is a lot more brutal than Pride and Prejudice, but I think it's about Mary's experience of her, and that's what we decided to go with. And I think it felt like an important story to tell as well. It felt like it was important to look at how, you know, who knows how critical she actually is. We're very much in Mary's point of view in this story. In we're, I mean, we're really tight in her point of view. I think there's about 2 scenes that she's not in, or and even though she's just like stepped out of frame or whatever. Mary's experience of her mother is really harsh, and there's a desperation of feeling like she's not living up to it. And it's your first experience of who and what the world expects you to be. And so it comes from your parents. And so there's a kind of overwhelming sense of failure from a really young age for Mary that she then has to go and try and undo. And we're so, I think I've got friends who, when we were growing up, they were so beautiful as teenagers, like incredibly beautiful. And they've gone out into their adult lives. There's no vanity. They don't care what they look like. They carry with them that sense of their appearance at 14. There's just this extraordinary confidence. I had a monobrow and quite severe acne for a lot of my teens, and I have carried that sense of my appearance forward, utterly stunned, to have found myself married. And I think that that's really interesting as well, because that those formative years, so much is set there. And I think Mary's story is about how hard it is to undo all of that and unpick all of that.
Yeah, I also love as well, I don't know if you've seen, but there's a lot of posts at the moment that it's like how siblings have different experiences of their parents, even if they grew up in the same house. And I was like, this is a perfect example of that, right? Mrs Bennet comes across really cruel and harsh in the book and in the show. She's still funny, but it feels different than the Mrs Bennet that you read in Pride and Prejudice. But that's because we're viewing it through Mary's lens. It's still so valid that Mrs Bennet could be both things. She could be the mother that Lizzy experiences, and then also this same woman that Mary's now experiencing.
Absolutely. If you're a sensitive soul and someone is like putting you down, there's just even tiny comments, she's got no bloom. We saw that from Mary's point of view. Now, if maybe, if like a show like The Affair that did things from different points of view, maybe if we showed that scene from Mrs B's point of view, she felt like she was being like, oh, it's a shame, isn't it? It's so hard for her. But what Mary received was brutality, and it hurts so much because there's so much trust in that relationship with your parents, isn't there? And there's a desire to please them that's very difficult to break away from. Yeah. So I think,
it's intrinsic almost. It's quite
intrinsic. Yeah. Mary's Mrs B, Mary's mother is, she feels like she has really, really let her down. And I think, in episode 7, there's a scene between Lizzy and Mary that is one of my favourites, I think. I mean, Poppy Gilbert had the very difficult job of coming on and playing Mary Bennet in a Pride and Prejudice spin-off where you're not the main character, and she had to at first be a little bit, I don't think she's horrible to Mary, but a little thoughtless. In fact, the moment she's the most horrible is at Netherfield, and that's Jane Austen. But she's kind of thoughtless at the beginning, just that she's so focused on herself, as we all are at that age. And then she has a chance to reflect. And when I bring them back together later in the series, and that felt really important to do, they have this moment where Mary gets to say to her, look, we have not had the same upbringing. And I feel that scene felt really important in their journey, actually, for Lizzy to realise and just to have a bit more thought around what her sister's experience has been.
I also think as well the beauty of how you kind of captured the sister relationship, and this also comes up in the book as well, is there was another quote that really just hit me about how Mary views her sisters. And she was like, her sisters shone, the book says, her sisters shone so brightly that they seemed to cancel out her failure and indeed eclipse her presence altogether. And I was like, my goodness, that's so tragic, like to feel that within your household. But then I was trying to relate it to what, like nowadays in real life, and is this not exactly how most young women feel on social media now? You're completely surrounded by kind of the most beautiful in society all the time, and you see it on your screen constantly. And that comparison culture is just so natural to a lot of us now because we're just so used to doing it. And I was like, it kind of shows this like microcosm like situation, this small ecosystem within the Bennet household that is so similar to what women feel in general in society now.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you're on the internet, you're surrounded by absolute perfection, aren't you? I mean, people living perfect lives and perfect, looking perfect and being incredibly beautiful and holding that up. And I always think of it as a kind of distorted hall of mirrors, really, because none of it's true. I work with some of the most successful, beautiful human beings on the planet, and you see the truth of most lives, and they're all as messy and complicated and have as bad days as anyone else. And that's why I really struggle with the social media thing sometimes. I think that for Mary, in that family, again, it's not that anyone's sort of, the sisters deliberately make her feel like that. It's not that they're cruel, they're just focused on themselves, and then it just becomes the narrative in the family. Oh yeah, she's the one who does this, oh, Mary. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of, so yeah, I do think that's true. The sort of idea of that's what we're all dealing with now, is this kind of perfection, physical perfection, that you feel like, well, I can't do that. I don't look like that. I'm never going to live up to that.
No, you just made me think as well, something that I'd love to touch back onto is that idea of having an advocate and things. And I think a conversation about Mrs. Gardiner and that role would be really helpful. Before we move on to that, though, I'd just like to bring in a little bit about Mr. Bennet, because this is also a character we see very differently, I think, in this series, in something that I know wasn't in the show, but actually broke my heart in the book. So I'd love to know how you came about kind of pulling this out. Was when Mary makes that book, the little book with all the quotes in from the authors and things that she's going to gift to Mr. Bennet. And then he dies before she can ever gift it, because she was kind of reluctant to do it anyway, thinking that he wouldn't appreciate it. That just broke my heart. But I was just curious. I was just like, it isn't something you left in. Was that a time thing or?
Yeah. So I agree. I love that moment. I think it's incredibly powerful and telling that she couldn't have the relationship with her mother, so she tried with her father. I think there's the glasses scene where she's found wearing glasses. I always thought Mr. Bennet seems quite nice to her in that moment. Now, Janice explained to me that actually he will always take the line that most annoys his wife. So he's nice to her because he's constantly poking Mrs. Bennet. He's not being nice to Mary. He couldn't care less whether she has glasses, or not. He knows he's the thrill of how he's winding up Mrs. Bennet today. So I think, yeah, he's really interesting. But what happened was, so it's a scene when you're translating, and basically when I'm adapting, my job is to distill the novel, right? To distill it, because I've got, in this case, I had 5 hours, so 10 half-hour episodes. And in the distillation, obviously there are things that get lost, but I will always try with moments that I love. Now, I love that. But on screen, what does that look like? It looks like a woman copying passages from a book onto paper. So visually, it's a visual medium, television. So visually, it's not the most exciting, right? But I was determined to get it in. So what I would do is I would have in other scenes, when other things were happening, she would be doing her little book. So when they come in to say, oh, you'll never guess, when Lydia and Kitty burst in, oh, you'll never guess what's happened downstairs, Mr. Collins, but she would be doing her little book, and she'd be in the library doing her little book. And then I had a scene where after Mr. Bennet died, Mrs. Hill comes in and Mary stood with the little book, and she says, what's that? And Mary said, oh, it's a book of quotes I made for Father, things I thought he would enjoy. But I never gave it to him. And Mrs. Hill says, oh, that's a shame. He would have liked that very much. And Mary says, no, he wouldn't. And she chucks it in the fire. So I wrote that. Now, when Mr. Bennet dies, there are 3 things happening. One, the highest stakes thing that happens is Mary is homeless. The second highest stakes that happens is Mary is stuck with her mother. And the third thing is the sadness that she never forged that bond with Mr. Bennet. And on television, when you've got 30 minutes for an episode, we ended that episode with the death of Mr. Bennet. So, because that's the highest stakes thing. We're destitute, I'm on my own with Mum. So that's the highest stakes thing. Now, could we have picked it up in the next episode? The trouble is, you've already played the highest stakes card you can play about the death of Mr. Bennet. So to play a slightly lower one, it doesn't really land in the way that it does in the book. So sometimes what I have to accept is that there are things that work better on screen. There are moments that we can really, where we go, this is ours, we've got this, we can play this so much better than you could have written it, whatever. But there are so many moments in because it started in novel form that just don't quite translate as you want. And it's the same with when she visited all her sisters, and before she goes to London, Mary visits all her sisters, and she has that moment with Mr. Collins where she starts to form a bond over time with Mr. Collins. Now, what does that look like on screen? It looks like 15 minutes of somebody walking around a garden with Lizzy, sitting and reading with Lizzy. It doesn't translate. So that's why I did the family reunion, because I thought I can cover off with humour. I can still have the humour of the family dynamic and the sort of joy of seeing the Bennets later on, but I can cover off that relationship with Lizzy that's changed. I can cover off the moment with Collins. I can cover off, the threat of Mrs Bennet kind of ruining her future and keeping her there as her companion. And I really wanted that hour at Pemberley, and I was worried that I was going to be made to kind of get back to the story of Hayward and Ryder quicker. And so my brilliant colleague Becca Kinder, she's like the equivalent when you're a writer, you need to stick something in a drawer for 6 months and then come back to it with fresh eyes. And I don't have that time. So she's my 6 months in a drawer. She's brilliant. I hand it to her. She reads it and she's so insightful. And she said, I reckon you can get the hour if you bring the Ryder Italy proposal forward. And I was like, yes. So and actually it works brilliantly, because in half an hour in Ep 10, you couldn't have back-to-back proposals. It would be a mess. So, Becca Kinder is my hero, and she helped me get that Pemberley moment. So yes, there are things in the book that I'm really sad about.
Yeah, I think as well, like, there's so much travel in this book. So I also, I totally get why you kind of needed to bring everyone together at Pemberley. Because I thought, goodness, if you fit all the traveling that actually happens in the book, you'd be moving constantly and it'd be so disjointed, I think, as you were watching it. Because you'd be like, 1 second we're in with the Bingleys, then we're with Lizzy, then we're back to the Collinses, then we're in London. Like, it would feel very all over the place, I think. So I can kind of get bringing all of that into one spot.
And hugely expensive because of all the different locations that you might be in for a very short space of time, and just allowing an audience to sit sometimes and properly connect feels important. Yeah.
Yes. Something that I'd love to talk about as well then, just as we were talking about things that you kind of needed to take out, or just adjust the kind of where they fell in the story. What was the thought process around adding the Miss Baxter into the story?
Again, there were things that are tricky. I think Miss Baxter and Mary becoming a governess both kind of fall into this on screen with an audience that may not be. Obviously, I had an audience who absolutely know the rules of this world. They know exactly how it operates. They know it so well. And then I have an audience who are new, and they don't know the rules. And I think Anne Baxter, I really wanted Mary to have a friend. I think female friendship, again, is not often explored. And in terms of what you've talked about with advocate, we'll talk later about Mrs. Gardiner, but it felt like she needed someone her own age who's just lovely and open. And, in a way, Mary going to London is a bit like, when you go off to uni and you kind of reinvent yourself. And then Caroline Bingley turning up is like your school bully arriving at your uni and going, hang on, you're not like that. And you're like, damn it, I thought I got to start again. Do you know what I mean? And so I wanted her to have a friend. And we also felt like on screen, we needed the complication of Hayward having a partner, because it felt too easy in a way otherwise for them to find their way to each other. We felt like it needed that extra level, that extra obstacle, so that it wasn't clear cut. Otherwise, I think, because for us, there are several options, right? There's Mr. Sparrow. I believe she could have been very happy with Mr. Sparrow. She could have been very happy with Mr. Collins. She could have been very happy with Mr. Ryder. But Hayward is that rare thing that not all of us find, and some of us are lucky enough to do. Is he's the one. He's her, And I feel like you feel that on screen from the off when the two of them come together. And so we needed to have a complication, and also this is a story about Mary. It's a story about self-love. It's her story first and foremost. And Mr. Hayward is a piece of that jigsaw. But him having Anne allowed us to keep going on her journey, keep her finding what she needs, get her looking. It meant that it didn't become just this kind of love story between these two people. So Anne allowed us to, and whenever we invented story, whenever I was inventing stuff, and I used Austen always. So a lot of people, I've seen people say, hang on, that's Sense and Sensibility. And I'm like, it absolutely is. Yes, that's where we borrowed it from. So he couldn't break that engagement off because that would be scandalous. But Anne could. That would be okay. And if it's not an engagement, it's an agreement. So and obviously Janice is wonderful at this stuff. So we took it to Janice and we said, how do you feel about this? And she was great. She was like, I love it. We had an engagement at first. She was like, make it an agreement. So that felt like we needed that on screen to keep it going on Mary's story. And the same with the governess. It was just about purpose, that she goes and she's kind of a temporary governess. But this was the age of, the romantic poets. And as Janice explained to me, this is like the sex, drugs and rock and roll of Austen's time. And so people were shifting in their thinking. And I think Mary deciding, I want to do something for me. I want to find someone like me and I want to teach them. She's brilliant because she's not the most intelligent naturally. She's just learned quite a lot of facts and can regurgitate, but she wants to try. She really wants to try. And I think just allowing her that purpose and finding out that, for me, the relationship she had with those children is really important in the story, because she that's the first time she finds purpose for herself and finds something she's good at. So those changes were made for those reasons.
No, I love that. And I'm so glad I asked you as well, because when I first was watching it, because I watched on BBC iPlayer, so I had a certain set of episodes come out and then I was waiting for the other set. And I was a bit nervous to start with when I saw Miss Baxter, because I was like, oh goodness, like Mary's had this whole life of being compared to other women. I didn't want it to become this kind of conflict between her. And then I thought, goodness, she's got this female friend now and she might lose that person over this whole situation. But I loved how Miss Baxter, she was like, no, it was my choice. I ended it and I found somebody else. And it was just like handled really nicely. So I actually was like, I love that. But then hearing your explanation of it, that really it helped that the story then didn't become kind of male centered, that it was Mary's pursuit of Mr. Hayward, I think is important as well. Because I think, although you don't necessarily feel that in the book, I feel like that would be hard to showcase on screen. And I think people would just be like, why is she not just going after him? And it would be difficult to show why she was kind of pursuing different things. So
without internal monologue. Yeah.
Also as well, like I love that you added more of her actually being a governess and being a governess outside of the house and what that could look like. Because again, I think the idea of purpose and just having something, building something for yourself is so important. And I love that message from Mary, especially when she has that conversation with Mrs Bennet where she's like, I want to build something for me. I think is just, massively important. And also she becomes kind of a woman that she would have benefited to have. I mean, she has Hill, obviously, earlier in her life, but then she becomes that for like other women, which I think is really important too. And that probably brings us back to that conversation of like having an advocate. And just, I absolutely love Mrs Gardiner. She's one of my favourite characters anyway, but I just think she's fantastic in this whole series.
For me, the most powerful message from this book was the transformative power of kindness on a young life. If we can step into a young life that's imperfect and not judge and not make our decisions about what we think that life should be, but just be there buffering and saying, okay, well, what do you think? Well, how do you feel about that? Well, what, rather than going, no, it's like this, and no, we do it like that, and you're not reaching what I think as a parent, parents often put standards on their kids that they don't reach themselves, that they're nowhere near reaching themselves. It's extraordinary. And I think that there's this woman who, and Indira was really good about that. She'd pick me up. If I ever had a line where she said, if I'd ever written a line where she sort of said to Mary, oh, you look wonderful in the scarlet or whatever, I think scarlet's a wonderful idea. She would pick me up and say, hang on a minute. I don't think, because she obviously doesn't think it's great, but she's saying, what do you think? What do you want? What do you need? And that message of the most important thing is how you feel about it is what builds Mary up to being able to stand up to her mother, to being able to turn down Ryder. I hope we're mentioning that I will spoiler things just so we can talk about
I'll put a note at the start that said there's spoilers throughout.
Right. That's just because ultimately that she could have said yes to Ryder in Ep 10 and that, even our hardest producer, Kate Crowther, who's brilliant, and she was working on Industry at the same time. Can you imagine that in your head? But she cried at that Ryder scene, that final Ryder scene. There's something. Laurie Davidson is fantastic in it, but Mary could have said yes. She doesn't, because Mrs Gardiner has taught her to just trust her instinct, to go, actually, you know what, you're all right on your own. What you're doing is great. And I think that that we could all learn a huge amount from Mrs Gardiner, and she gave me a chance. I mean, I love her in the book, and when I was building her up as a character, she gave me a chance to say the things that I want to say to the wonderful young people in my life as well, because when you're a kid, popularity, right, when you're a kid is about, are you fun? Are you kind? Do you share your toys and play nicely, right? That makes you popular. then this really weird thing happens when you're in about 11, secondary school age, where popularity becomes about whether you're prepared to sort of look down your nose. It becomes about people. It becomes about power plays. You can easily talk about someone behind their back without them knowing. You don't need to put your hand over your mouth and whisper and look at them and say, I'm talking about you. It's a power move. You don't need to, when someone comes and talks to you, drop your eye contact and make them repeat what they're saying. It's a power move. And the people who make those power plays when you're 11, they suddenly become popular. They are the top of the social hierarchy. And I experienced it myself and didn't like it and kind of just shrunk in a corner. And then I've watched all these glorious young people in my life walk into that hierarchy of secondary school and come away going, oh my God, no, it's fine, I'm worthless. I'm not, no, don't worry about me, I'll just go over here. God, no, they're amazing. Hey, those people are amazing. And you're like, they're not amazing, they're just prepared to be really nasty. Caroline Bingley is just me. She's just don't get me wrong, I could write you a film about Caroline Bingley where we feel really sorry for her and what she's been through. Do you know what I mean? But ultimately, the idea that the Caroline Bingleys of this world are setting the self-worth of these gorgeous, open, lovely people really troubles me. And I love that, what I try and say to the people in my life is, do you know what? When you get to 16, it starts to undo. You'll get people into adulthood who behave like that, but they'll be very lonely. And actually, we return to, are you a nice, supportive, kind, open, sharing person? Then that's really what popularity looks like. And so we're just hitting the end of that journey, really, for Mary. And you've got to have the confidence of Lizzy. Like, Lizzy's one of those gorgeous, truly popular people who is lovely and kind, and Jane, lovely and kind and open and warm, and people like them. But she also, Caroline Bingley just bounces off her. But if you're a Mary, they absolutely wound you at every turn.
Yeah, and I agree. I think there is that journey of, well, I even think like with me in high school, I couldn't have ever dreamed that I would like do a podcast like this and I talk about Austen and all of those things. But obviously it's like going through uni, then finishing uni and just realizing that I really didn't care anymore what other people thought. I just wanted to do what brought me joy, what I was passionate about. And then you find like-minded people. And that's what I love about Mary's story as well. The friends that she meets, they share her interests. And I love when she keeps pushing back, like when her sisters, like, especially Lydia's like being like, oh, who could you possibly have as a friend in London? And she's like, actually, I do have friends and they share similar interests to me. We love to talk about books and poetry. And I just think there's something so magical in your life when you start to make those connections and you just meet like-minded people. I think it changes your life.
My life changed entirely when I went to drama school, and I found my people. And I went to Manchester School of Theatre. It's very, very grounded. A lot of people go to Raja and they talk about how snooty it is and whatever, but that was just not mine. So I went to Manchester. It was very grounded. We were all much of a muchness. We were all from very similar walks of life. And I'd felt on the outside of everything for so long, and going in and finding my people. And when you're a kid, if you can get up on a stage and do anything, people are like, oh, you're so weird, why are you doing that? It's all that you have to deal with. And actually all those qualities that made me feel like at school like I should sit on myself were things that have provided me a really interesting, joyful career and life with brilliantly interesting people. It's true, isn't it? If you can just shake off that feeling of you're supposed to do this, or, people will judge you if you do that, and just go, well, actually, what do I want to do? You could end up doing, really interesting things.
No, I think so as well. And I love the conversation again that Mary has with Mrs Bennet, where she tries to kind of explain this to her, that she's like, I want to choose my own path. And it really made me think of the Jane Austen quote that says, I wish as well as everybody to be perfectly happy, but like everybody, it must be in my own way. And I just think that's so true. Like that always like really sticks out to me in something I'd love to talk about in like the show and the book and stuff is the amount of Easter eggs that you have in there. I know you were saying about people noticing certain things, and it really resonates because it links back to other well, in the book, there's so many ties to just like the world of Jane Austen. Like the amount of Easter eggs I was finding in the book was crazy. Yeah. But then what I love about the show as well is you have the added benefit that you can add Easter eggs from other adaptations, right? Because it's on screen. And I was kind of noticing those as well. Like I love the scene where we've got to have a wet shirt scene, got to have one of those because the 95 one, like absolute perfection. And there was like just so many others. The orange dress that Caroline Bingley wears just took me straight back to the 95 one, where she has this like this orange dress on that's just like very out there and like different. And yeah, there was a few things that I was like, I love that you've been able to add things in for the Janeites who are watching, but also not make it kind of exclusive to them, that also new people can come to it.
Yeah, and hopefully as they discover the world of Austen, they'll go back and go, hang on a minute, I know where you got that from. I mean, the wet shirt. So I was going to put Hayward in a lake. And then I got this note through from Jane Tranter saying, both lads in the lake, please. And I was like, how am I going to get both? How are they going to both fall in a lake? Like I was really, but this is the thing about working with someone like Jane. She really knows what she's talking about. She's brilliant. And she's such a brilliant guide for me whenever I'm lost. If she's happy, I'm happy. And so she said, you've got to get them both in, which I'm so glad we did. And that scene was absolutely boiling hot. We thought we'd killed Laurie and Donal at one point because the medic was taking their temperature and he said really seriously, he was like, they're hypothermic. So we all like leapt into action. Like Alice, who's one of our in costume, who was like a hero on set every day, was legging it down this pontoon with towels and dry robes, and we were all like literally holding towels. Me and the producer John Pocock, and we were all holding towels around the boys who were like, we're all right. Anyway, hypothermic doesn't quite mean you've got hypothermia, so everyone lived. But we had them in and out of the water all day. It was absolutely boiling hot that day. And I loved as the boat came in. I mean, I actually had to hold my nose and move away from camera because the position that Ella adopted is that boat, like the Queen of Sheba, when she sat, like it's so funny. And classic Ella, who just hit every beat of every scene with utter perfection. She is beyond a star. But I also said to our producer, because it was really hard for the lads to swim and hold the boat, so we had a stunt woman behind, and I said, can I just clarify, is are two men pretending to do the job that one woman is actually doing silently and unseen over there? And he was really laughing. We were just cracking up because it was literally our stunt was flippers on, physically pushing that boat back because the boys couldn't. So yeah, the wet shirts was so much fun for us. There's a lot of forearms action, which is, so it was scripted. I did script that she had this thing about forearms. It really, my social realist film, the first thing I ever wrote, that Jess Barden's character looks at Joe Dempsey's forearms as he's driving, and I just think it's a really interesting, because it's a part that's of the body that's revealed, but also the difference between a boy's and a man's forearms are quite different. And so as you're growing up, you sort of notice that change. I scripted it, but Jennifer Sheridan, she just went, I mean, the forearm stuff is brilliant with the graces, and
and he's just like his veins and everything. I was like, you know what, this is actually so,
I love what she did.
It's so valid too, because I feel like we've all had that moment that we're like, he's got very nice forearms and I can't really explain like what that means.
So weird, isn't it? But yeah, and the same Asim Masavi, who directed the second block so beautifully, he picked up on the forearms action. But what I think that what I love about working with Jennifer Sheridan, who's become like a great friend, she's so talented at the dramatic scenes and teasing that stuff out, but she's got a brilliant eye for comedy, and she never shied away from the comedy, which I think, especially in those early episodes where it really, it can feel a bit like a puppy is being kicked when everyone's at Mary. She just brought out so much humour, and she's obsessed with the 1995. I don't know how many times she's watched it, like ridiculous, and she just would occasionally match a shot, or she would find something. So there's a bit I'd put in where Mary blows out a candle and then stubs her toe on the way to bed. And she matched it with, like the position that Ella sat in and everything, she matched it with a shot from the 1995 of Lizzy, and she blows out the candle. But obviously Lizzy blows out the candle and then makes her way to bed perfectly. But this is Mary, so she stubs her toe. And, and also Lucy Briars, because I wrote Mary with Lucy Briars in my head, I did say, like, the casting was all done by Carleen Crawford and her team, and I mean, they gave us the best cast. They're just the most wonderful group of people. I can't say enough good things about them. But the only one I was like, put my hand up about was, do you think we could get Lucy Briars? Because honestly, for me, the fact that 1995 Mary knows that 2026 Mary is okay, that makes me well up. Like, that's what it means to me. And there's a beat of her in Ep 10 discovering that Mary's okay. And I don't think if it had been any other actor playing Mrs. Hill, I don't think they'd have let me keep it, because it was a hassle. We had to get the second block director in while Lucy was in the first block. We had to find a location. Like, this is again our brilliant producer John Pocock making things happen for us. It was just, I think any other actor and they'd have been like, we can't do that. But it felt so important. And the first scene we shot on the first day was the optometrist scene, when she's getting her eyes tested. And in between takes, Ella said, to Lucy, I can't believe you're here. Like, this is incredible. And Lucy was like, you are a wonderful Mary, and I'm so proud to hand on the baton. I mean, even telling you this now, I'm like going. And when she hugged her and sent her off to London, I mean, I honestly can barely get through those scenes.
No, it's so special. Also, as well, like, I just think there's something I talk about a lot on the podcast, and that's like capturing the essence of Austen. In some adaptations nail it, in others not so much. But you know when people who create it are also Janeites. It's something you can feel, whether it's a book or whether it's a TV adaptation or a film adaptation. And the only way I can describe it is capturing the essence of Austen. And I don't really I can't fully tell you what that incorporates, but I just know what it feels like when it comes together. And the fact that you chose to have Lucy Briers as Hill is part of that. Like, it's just being like all the Jane Austen community. Like, we see you, and like, we're with you, and like, we're going to leave these things in so that you feel like you've also come on this journey with us. And I think it's so important.
Yeah. And I think, it's like you said about that, the quote about finding happiness your own way. While I was writing this, I was rereading everything. I mean, I went back and read Love and Friendship, and I was reading the letters, and I was, and so all of that was feeding into what was coming out in the writing. So that quote, exactly that quote was very much in my head when I was thinking about Mary's journey. And like you say, that the Easter eggs, and there's so many Easter eggs, but even the fact that he's called Tom, and she gets offered toasted cheese, and all of these things. There's so many little Easter eggs in there, and I loved that and wanted to kind of continue that as much as we could without it being distracting or try hard, but just gently acknowledge. I think ultimately it comes from a place of absolute love of the work, and Jen Sheridan, our lead director, and I, we adore Jane Austen's work. We both adored Janice Hadlow's book. And I think every decision we made came from that place.
Yeah, I think that's so important when you're just like creating something. A whole other topic that I was going to discuss at some point, not on this episode, but in a different thing, was about when it's appropriate to kind of take past work and how much you can change it. Like, where's the creative leniency to change stuff quite dramatically? That was just like a thought process I was having. But so I actually love when people adapt things in a way that feels very respectful, and it shows that they love like the source material. And I really felt this with this whole TV show. So I felt it was such a cozy watch for me. And it was so fun to kind of capture all of the Easter eggs in there. Like, I thought that was amazing. And I absolutely love the shirt boat scene. One of the funniest scenes, honestly, I was cracking up. That scene. And then also the drawing scene when Hayward shows her the drawings of the birds. Oh my goodness, that totally cracked me up as well.
I think just being able to have that fun with it, and actually, so I'd written it that he'd done a bad drawing, and that she says it's got too many legs, and he says, can we say it stood in a plant? So that's in the script, right? And then the art department kept bringing drawings to Asim Asabi, who, again, brilliant dramatic director, but also has a body of comedy work that is excellent, and he knows what's funny, and so he kept sending it back saying it's not right, it's too, when someone who's actually, because these people are really talented, and they try to draw badly, and you're like, it's still better than anything any of us do. Yeah. Anyway, I think someone from the art department may have got their 5 or 6 year old to do the drawings. And they said, right, it needs 3 legs, 2 mouths, and got them. And so actually it was on set that I think Donald didn't show them to Ella until the take. That day that scene was a night. We had to send crew away because there was so much corpsing. There's a Steadicam bit where they do the bird noises. So James Scott, our incredible camera operator, is on Steadicam, which is really heavy, and he's being guided by Georgie, our grip. And Georgie was hysterical when Donal was making the bird noises. So she's holding on to the camera operator and she's shaking with laughter. We're like, right, oh, anyway. And I think we, again, I knew Donal was a brilliant actor, and when he came and read with Ella, and the chemistry was phenomenal. I hadn't expected him to be genuinely as hysterically funny as he is. I mean, the twinkle in his eye when he's doing those bird noises, because he knows he's going to set her off, and he kept doing them slightly differently. So every time Ella thought she was okay and she could get through it, he'd change it a bit, and there's some brilliant takes on that. But I think sums the whole experience up for me. This wasn't a high budget shoot. We didn't have loads of money. We weren't a big crew with cranes and this and that and the other. We were a very, very small team of people. But because of that, we all mucked in. We all got on. We all, the first time Caroline Bingley was rude to Mary, the entire crew booed her. And Tanya Reynolds is the loveliest woman on earth, bless her heart. People would walk past Monsters and be like, "Oh, Mary." The conversations I had with people from all different departments about their experience that connected to Mary's was incredible. And when we were doing that scene with the birds and stuff, our first AD Alex was on one side hiding in the trees, and the entire rest of us crew were in the other side hiding in the trees. And he said to me afterwards, he said, "You know what? I looked up and the entire crew were just beaming." And he was like, "And you never see that. Normally they're off getting a tea and someone's doing this and they're worrying about that." And everyone was watching the scene and beaming. And I feel like, for me, that sums up the whole experience of making this show.
Yeah, I think you can really tell that. Like, I've seen other interviews with the actors and just like the posts that you guys have been sharing online. And I think it's so funny because it really does remind me. I went and stayed at Teal Rectory, which was what they used for Mr. Collins's house in the 1995 Pride and Prejudice. It used to be a B&B. And the lady who owns it, she's absolutely lovely. But she has this little book of all these pictures from the set when they were filming there. And you see all like the actors and them just like chilling together. And when I was looking through the photos that you guys have shared of the set and like the moments that you captured and stuff, I was like, it really gives me the same energy as I had when I was seeing all those pictures. And I was like,
Yeah.
it just looks like such a nice experience, and people just coming together to create something they're equally passionate about, and just good people coming together.
I think, and that's what Lucy said when she was on set. She was like, "It's so weird because it's so like that same vibe." And she is one of the most brilliant people I've ever had a conversation with. Honestly, the stories she told us about the 1995, the stories she told about her career, about her dad. She's a really warm, generous human, and I adored her. And I think you're right. I do think there's something that translates. I felt like when we were doing it, I thought if an inch of this love and joy that we have for this, story we've had making this story translates to screen, then hopefully people will, there is, it is shot through with growing pains. Don't get me wrong. It's not a slight story. It's not a simple story. It's, it's got real character to it. If you let that in and you follow Mary's journey, it's a real character driven story. But it felt like if we could translate that, then hopefully people would have an enjoyable watch.
No, and I think a lot of that is credit to like your writing with it as well, because you really have, especially like you said in the first few episodes, you've really got to balance that kind of, some things are happening are quite negative and upsetting. Then you've also got to balance that with just like the humour. In the line that Mrs Bennet says, where it's something like, "I can't pass him around the family like a sherry trifle." Honestly, I was like, that is perfect. I love it.
You know what? Credit where it's due there, Ruth Jones. So the line in the book is, "I can't just pass him around the family." And Ruth said to me, "Can I put in like a sherry trifle?" And like, but actually not a huge amount was changed, but that I was like, yes. And Ruth Jones, like, she's just, yeah, she was brilliant.
That's
And I love that. As well.
That's such a perfect line, but it just really shows that balance, because Mrs Bennet's like is just like feeling quite like irritated about the whole situation. She wants things to work out how she wants them to, but then just throwing that little bit of humour in. And I was like, it's so British as well. I was like, it's brilliant.
Yeah, and I think it was walking that line all the time of, it's not easy to walk the line of because if you play the humour, then to try and really move people or really get them to connect to a character moment. I feel like most of us are moved because of the recognition of our own experience. Certainly cathartic for me writing it. But if you can, walking that line felt like that was my aim all the time, was to make sure it felt truthful and balanced, but people could, that it was funny and joyful as well as heartbreaking.
Yeah, and one more thing that I just want to touch on, because I just think I mean, Janice does a fantastic job of this in the book, and it really does show her understanding not only of Austen, but I think of the Regency era. Something that you touched on earlier is the fact that obviously the Romantic poets were really on the rise during this time. And there was the 18th century debate between Romanticism and Enlightenment. And I feel
Yeah.
like this story really captures that perfectly in Mary herself, because I feel like she has that inner divide within her. And then I think obviously you have Hayward and Ryder, who like very much, I think Hayward again has that conflict between the two with his like career
Yeah.
in law and stuff, but Ryder's like very much like a romantic, which is obviously very reminiscent of Sense and Sensibility, right? That is the complete debate that Austen's having within that book. And so I love how she captures it within this story, and then how you've kind of captured it on screen, because I think it really comes through. And I hope that encourages other people to learn more about like the era or read other works like Wordsworth as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think what it does is you know, what I loved about it, and I agree, it is very much the Sense and Sensibility, you know, the story. But I think what it does is it makes you realize the effect of this work on people and what it meant to people, and you know, poetry, I think still now people find real solace in it and find, but it's not quite what it was then, in terms of it was completely shifted a way of thinking about your life. I mean, it was huge. And I think as much as you can be told that at school, do you know what I mean? You can be told, yeah, it changed, and you're like, yeah. But when you see the effect it has on a human life, on Mary's life, and I love Hayward because he is that kind of, that debate is raging within him, and he really wants to be kind of the rider, but he's also, it's not naturally who he is. And I think but when you actually see what it does to Mary's life, what it allows her to do, especially as a woman, I think, and also how she goes back at Ryder when he says about, you know, well, we should do away with these tire conventions, and it is like, well, women don't have those. She says something about the, you know, the consequences are borne quite literally sometimes by the woman, and I think so. It is a really interesting way to examine that debate in a way that feels really alive. Do you know what I mean? And I think rather than a kind of dry textual, you know, in this period people felt a bit like this. It actually feels really live. It's certainly. I ended up reading so much, actually. I mean, I was terrible for rabbit holes on this. I read some Catherine Macaulay. But the Wordsworth, Ella actually bought me like this on the last day. She gave me this beautiful, like, old Wordsworth copy of Wordsworth's lyrical ballads. And when I opened it, it was from like 1906 or something, but it would belong to Mary. And it belonged to a Mary in the front, it said, and she'd got 67% in an exam. And I loved that she sort of wasn't that clever. I was like,
oh
yeah.
my gosh, the serendipity. I kind of loved that.
You hadn't even opened it. It was all just tied up beautifully. And then when I said to her, did you know it's from a Mary? And she only got 67% in her end of year exam. We were cracking up. But yeah, I mean, but it's a beautiful book. And like I say about my love of books and secondhand bookshops and stuff that my uncle fostered, you know, going back and reading those books and holding those old Wordsworths that you can get hold of in those shops and stuff. It was brilliant to go and explore that stuff again. And I hope it encourages people to get out and read.
It's such a treat that we get to go to the Lake District as well, because I spent a lot of my childhood in the Lake District. Like, I absolutely love it. I always call it my heart's home, and I'm always tragic. It's always so sad to me when I read Pride and Prejudice that I'm always a little bit sad that they end up in Derbyshire and not the Lakes, even though that's very crucial to the plot. I'm always a bit like very sad. So I'm really glad in this story we get to do that, and obviously you got like chance to, well, kind of set it within the Lake District as well. I don't know how you managed to film some of these things though, because I was a little bit like, we're kind of in Windermere, but we're also like looking at Scarfell. I was like, this is a very interesting area where we're.
Yeah, it was really difficult. So we shot in the Brecon Beacons.
Okay, I was going to say, I was like, I don't recognise this.
Yeah. So they did their best to kind of get sort of slate, you know, the sort of slate matte backgrounds and stuff, and it didn't look too green. But and then there was a lot of stuff superimposed in it. But the trouble is that the Lake District itself does look a bit superimposed. Do you know what I mean? It's like so beautiful, it's not real. So when you're trying to add it into a shot, you're like, you can't work it out because yeah. So the special effects, I mean, they did an incredible job of kind of building this stuff in for us so we could shoot. And the storm, I mean, it was, you know, our crew up a mountain in their wet weather gear, everyone getting, you know, soaked by these hoses. But actually, what's funny is, again, this is like what our cast were like, you know, they were in hysterics. They had this incredible day together, and we were constantly pelting them with freezing cold water, but they just kind of had a really funny time and enjoyed it. And the scene, I love those scenes. I love Caroline needing help and all of that. It's great.
Yeah, no, I love that as well, that she goes back and helps, because I think that just shows like the kind of person that Mary is. Like, even if someone's been awful to her, she's not out there trying to seek revenge. She still shows up exactly the person that she is, which is just a nice person. So I love that. Yeah. Well, I had a really wonderful time. I loved reading the book. And as I was saying to everybody earlier, I really recommend picking this up. One of my favourite reads this year.
Look at the state of mine. This is mine, look. Just a couple of flags.
It's so funny because I read it on Kindle. I had no idea how large it was, to be honest with you. I was just kind of like in a whirlwind reading it. I didn't realise how big it is until I was watching the show. Then I was like, oh my goodness, actually what I'm realising is there's actually quite a big book. Like, no wonder you've struggled to get everything in.
Do you know what? It is intimidating, but you don't feel it. Testimony to Janice's incredible writing, that it is just beautiful. And when I finished it, I was like, well, I could read it again. I'll read more. I mean, I've read it 1,000 times now, but you can read it over and over again, and you almost finish it thinking, but I want more.
No, literally, yeah. I'm about to go back and read it again because I really want to do some like extra content around it. So I need to just like reread it so that I can actually like make content as opposed to just being so engrossed in the story.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of need to read it once as like for enjoyment, and then read it again if you want to do analysis of it, I think is the the key, which is a bit like Austen. That's why you can reread Austen all the time. So
over, and you see different things every time, don't you? And I also think as you shift ages, as I've grown up, I'm like, oh, I never got that before. That's why she stands up to those rereads, and we still love her.
Yeah, and our sympathies for different characters change. Like you said earlier, you could probably write a story from the perspective of Caroline Bingley and it'd be so different. Like I did a whole essay on like how Caroline Bingley's like the pick-me of Austen, but actually but at the same time it's like actually there's so much to empathize when you kind of look past her like really harsh demeanor and how she treats people. There's so much under that. And also as well, we've all gone through that era, right? We've all gone through a time where we kind of had these like pick-me qualities. So I'm just like, there is no character in Austen that I don't think we can at least find something that we can see within ourselves.
I agree. We find something of ourselves, some version of ourselves, and something that maybe we don't like about ourselves, or some period we went through where we weren't our best, or whatever it might be. But I think it's all there. It's all present, and that's why I'm a screenwriter, because I feel like when we share these experiences, it feels really important to share these experiences and to say, have you ever felt like this? It's bad, isn't it? Have you ever felt like that? Yeah, that was quite good. But it's a really important part of our human existence. And when people ask me about AI coming in and stuff, and it's annoying, but human connection. I think most of us know that we need human connection, and we need human connection of shared experiences. And that's what, Austen, 250 years ago that she was born, and here we are needing her work and being informed by her work and being comforted by her work. That's a kind of extraordinary thing.
No, it really is. And I think that's a lovely note to finish on as well. It's been such a pleasure, Sarah. I really appreciate you coming on.
I really enjoyed it. No, it's been lovely to talk about it all.
No, I had a great conversation with you. I don't know what you can share because obviously it's like a team project thing, but do you want to let people know where they can follow things on social media, where the show is coming out, and like the timings for other areas? Because I have people listening kind of all over the world. So I don't know if you can share a bit about that.
Okay, great. So the whole series is available on iPlayer and BBC at the moment. On May the 6th, it will be launched on BritBox in the US. And we have heard the cries from around Europe, and I hope that somebody's working on that for you very soon. So I really hope you enjoy.
Oh, amazing.
On social media at the Other Bennet Sister on Instagram. And also the TikTok edits, right? I don't have social media because I love it, but I need to work. But I did download TikTok the other night for 2 hours and watched these incredible edits that people have done. I watched a woman's response to one of the episodes, this incredible young woman's response to one of the episodes. And I just want to say massive thanks if anyone should see it, because it was the most beautiful, heartwarming shared experience. So thank you. But yeah, TikTok is edits on TikToks and Other Bennet Sister on Instagram.
And I will definitely tag the Other Bennet Sister account as well so that people can follow
Oh,
along. And
thank
you can
you.
see those photos I was on about like the set and just like them taking photos of the crew and everything, because I think they're really lovely to see as well. Just that kind of background of what was going on. But
Yeah.
yeah, that is everything from us today. And I will see you in another episode.